All right, so hi everyone. I'm Amanda Bender, the founder of Kilo, and I'm here with Max Goodberg, good friend of mine, co-founder and CEO of Flux. Wait a
Great to
minute.
meet everybody. It's COO, but that's okay.
I was like, CEO, I was like, wait, Max, I said the wrong thing.
Not a problem.
COO of Flux. So like I said earlier, I'm really sad we can't be meeting in person because I always love our time together. But thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first and foremost, tell us about your origin story, not only just about Flux, but about yourself as well.
Yeah, so I grew up in Los Angeles and was curious about computers since the very early days. I remember back in 80, 86 days helping my dad work on the very first computers and cleaning the clicky-clacky keyboards with my tiny little fingers. There were some child labor laws violated, but we'll leave that for another time. I would take things apart, I'd clean them, I'd put them together, and that continued through junior high, high school, college. Majored in computer science so I could keep going with software development, and ended up graduating at a time where it was not so great in the job market for tech folks. There were people with PhDs taking entry-level positions, and I was fresh, ready to enter the workforce. So I actually ended up taking my first jobs in the creative field. So I was a graphic designer and then turned art director for a computer component distributing company here in the Bay Area. And after about 3 years of that, I really wanted to go back and do what I was passionate about. So I joined a startup, went back to LA, and I was their head of engineering and technology. It was an e-commerce company and focused on just distribution of various types of goods with great margins, built back-end inventory systems and front-end customer service. I was answering phones. I was coding the website. I was creating the databases. I was kind of doing everything top to bottom. And I realized that I wanted to really specialize in something. And the best place to do that would be to go to the Bay Area once more and take a role doing what I was best equipped to do, which I found a company called Freewheel. And I joined as one of the first sales engineers of the company, first kind of teen numbers of people within the organization in the US. And we ended up, we're in the video advertising space. And one of my first jobs was to go tell Warner Brothers that they should use our technology rather than Google's, which was a bit overwhelming to say the least. But I had gotten my big break in Silicon Valley and I sallied forth and flew back to LA. You'll notice a pattern here, back and forth, back and forth. And we did it. It worked really well. They ended up using our technology, one of our first customers, and went on to sell a lot of other major media companies. The company itself grew drastically over time, and I grew with it. So started as individual contributor, ended up managing all of the customer-facing technical teams. From there, ended up founding the business operations function. As the company was doubling in size year over year, we kept running into roadblocks that were seemingly unnecessary. And in my personal journey, it had always been one of my passions to move from the technical side to business side, business management, entrepreneurship, things like that. And thankfully, I had leaders who were willing to give people a shot, who demonstrated great potential and acumen. And I was given the opportunity to start that function as well as run the one that I was currently in charge of. Ended up taking over as COO of that company as it was acquired into Comcast, and ended up becoming a very large division of a very large company. And what the challenges that we would face every year were really repeatable. It was, we were trying to match the right people in the organization to what the company needed to get done. And all sorts of things got in the way. Traditional HR systems were not structured well to access just knowing who's here in my company and what can they do and what do they want to be doing. And similarly, individuals felt unseen by their companies. It was really difficult to find what paths they could take and who else was like them in the company to indicate some advice or some mentorship where they could figure out the next step of their career inside their current company, which is what I had always benefited from with that last opportunity. And so my co-founders, Nick and Wei, were both co-workers of mine at that company. And during that process, we all saw a major amount of mobility from myself and my creative career path that I mentioned to our CTO at Flux, Wei. He started his career in Beijing, ended up moving physically to New York, changed roles a couple times. He joined my customer-facing team for a while and ran support. He went back to engineering.
That, Max?
That was Wei.
That
Oh
was
yeah,
it.
yeah. So he went from an engineering job to a customer-facing job, and then back to engineering, while I had gone from an engineering job to a sales job to a business operations job. So we've all done a variety of things, and that's what we wanted to create with Flux was the ability for other organizations to scale that concept of internal mobility and really connect the aspirations, the ambitions, and the abilities of their talent to the evolving work needs of the organization, whatever that may be at any given point in time. So everyday work transforms into career opportunity.
And then, so how did you and Nick meet again?
We met actually as two very early employees at Freewheel. So I joined, I think, in August of 2008, and Nick joined in September or October. So he had moved from Chicago. He was working at a very traditional media company, Tribune, and he came to his interview in Silicon Valley with a suit and a tie. And I said, "Don't trust him. We should hire that guy." 10 years later, he's my co-founder and one of my best friends. It's been great ever since. So yeah, we met there, and we worked very closely in our day-to-day roles, but we also had a personal relationship in the company. And he had gone off to run another organization. I had stayed at Comcast doing my role. When I decided to leave, him and I really got back in touch and decided to go on the entrepreneurship journey together.
Shout out to Nick. Hi, Nick. Hope you listen to this.
A resident Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So something that I really appreciate you and thank you for sharing that story is also your humor and your silliness. So that's a big part of something that's important to me to stay mentally healthy and sane. So what do you find beautiful about being an entrepreneur and how do you fold in that like silly comical side of yourself?
Yeah. I've had my experience working in boring jobs, and it never fit me very well. We spend more of our time at work than we do not at work in our lives, which I think is something sad generally about the state of humanity. But if we're going to be doing that, then we might as well do it with people that we enjoy working with on a problem that's meaningful to us and bring our full selves to every one of those experiences. And so for me, what's really beautiful about being an entrepreneur is you get to choose the people that you work with, and you get to see those people develop. You get to help provide them opportunity. You get to learn from them. They teach me far more than I think I teach them in most cases. But they're really passionate about the same thing that I'm passionate about because we came together in service of this opportunity. And being able to create those new relationships, to watch those people grow and to learn from them is one of, I think, the best parts of entrepreneurship. In a similar sort of vein, I think the connections that you make with peers, those could be business peers, they could be mentors, all the sisters and brothers in the entrepreneurship community, is a really amazing resource to have, both on a professional level and a personal level. And I think it comes from doing something so very difficult. At all points, the odds are stacked against you. The longer your company's around, ideally, the better the odds get that you're going to survive and stay growing and stay moving. But it's always an uphill battle. And so having other people who really identify and understand with those challenges and just the experience of going through that, and can lend their expertise to really help you with whatever it is you're going through at the moment. That could be a connection, it could be moral support, it could be experience or wisdom from their own journeys. But people are so generous with their time, and it's really an amazing thing.
I found that too. I like that you said that because I was just thinking you have been my brother in entrepreneurship. And along the way, as Kilo has formed, you've been a wonderful resource to me and given me some great feedback. So thank you for that.
Well, I really, really think of it as my absolute pleasure to be able to do so. As this is actually maybe my last point about what I think is amazing of being an entrepreneur, going through the journey. It really transforms the way that you look at yourself and your outlook on challenges and on your opportunities and also your personal relationships. I think it makes you much more grateful for the things that you have. And while you're striving to attain these milestones along the path, the people who are there who you can reference and who become stronger relationships because of it, and help you change who you are as a person through that process is invaluable. I think, I don't know, coaching or talk therapy is probably the only other realm where maybe parenting as well, where you learn so much about yourself because of an external situation. And you don't really think about that going in. You think about all the challenges, you think about the logistics, and can I survive for a year not paying for myself, not paying myself, and all those things. But you don't think about I'm going to be a different person throughout this journey, and I'm going to come out of it hopefully with some wisdom. So where there's others who seek your advice, I think you can really identify with that situation, and hopefully you can provide some value. Although I think constantly I'm still learning in so many areas that I question my ability to lend a lot of wisdom, but what I can is yours and anybody else who wants it.
Yes, thank you. And I'm wondering how you actually keep track of what you're grateful for. Do you have any sort of like journal that you do? Do you say things to yourself? Do you have like an app that you use?
Yeah, for me, it's really spending time outside of computers and writing and all the things that I do to keep track of what I have to do when I'm in those situations. I think I spend so much of my day in front of an agenda, in front of a meeting, or trying to plan out what's next. That for me, the idea of using a journal or writing to capture that is a little overwhelming. So I actually find the best place to feel that gratitude and to reflect on how I'm dealing with things and how I feel about myself is actually just getting out into nature. I happen to be fortunate enough to live near an open space and some green field, and so I just leave the house after either a tough meeting or a great meeting and take kind of a 10-minute walk, take my dog, or just go out by myself and just gather my thoughts. And it's really, really grounding to change your physical surrounding, to not be in a city and to have some nature around you and see how large the world is and that whatever you're facing is not that big of a deal. It will work itself out one way or the other and everything will be okay. That's where I find I do my best thinking about that.
Yeah, and it sounds so cliche, like get out in nature, but it's very true. Our brains definitely crave a change of scenery. And when we're seeing wind blow through trees or kids playing in a park, or we're just noticing the path we're walking on out in nature, and I know I sound like such a hippie, but it really does, how we actually absorb that stimuli is really important to us. And this is a bit of a tangent, but have you heard about this thing called earthing?
No, I haven't.
Anyway, it's about really like getting your feet in the dirt, like
Mm-hmm.
making sure you connect to the earth because it can be rejuvenating. And a friend of mine had sent it to me recently, an article about it. And then my mom was telling me about a documentary. And I was like, oh, that's what I do when I go to Hawaii. Like I get this sense of reconnecting with the earth there. And like when you go outside, whether you're walking your dog or spending time by water, I think it's really important. And it also reminds us, at least me, of how small I am and just to like keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I was, talking a lot, I feel like, about connections. And I think that's an important connection to forget because we all come from such a self-centric place. That's just the society that we're in and the culture that we developed through.
Mm.
And in Western civilization, we have this like, I'm somewhere behind my eyeballs looking out at this world. And so I'm inherently separate from everything that is around me. The problems that I'm facing, the people I'm talking to, all of that is separate from me. And that's not the reality. The reality is you're part of all of it. Everyone is and everything is. And the more you can remember that, the more you stay centered and are able to come to problems and opportunities with empathy and with creativity and really coming with an intention rather than a reaction. And I think that's a really important thing to do if you're going to have the outcomes that you want to create in the world.
Hmm. I totally agree. Being aware that we're part of a larger ecosystem is really important. And sharing for me that I'm community made rather self made is something I try to think about more days than not. That you're part of my community. People have helped me along the way with Kilo. And even before when I made the jump from psychology to tech, I couldn't have done any of that on my own. It was a community of people who helped me get there. So I definitely agree.
Yeah, and I don't want to represent that I'm an expert at any of these things. I try and I try and remember them. I succeed better some days than others, but it's something I strive towards, especially about that reactivity and the connections point. I think those are very powerful concepts.
Mhm. Mhm. And what about what you find difficult, ugly, or hard about being a founder? And how do you stay sane amidst those hard things?
Yeah, I think most of the tough stuff, not to repeat myself too much, but I think it really comes from reactions to challenges. It's the way you internalize external things that really causes the most challenging points of being an entrepreneur or really anything that's such a large undertaking, at least for me. So trying to avoid that as much as possible and not have the external influence your internal, which is easier said than done. But those tactics like exercise, going out in nature, but really reconnecting with other people who are in your sphere. And those could be personal relationships. Usually that's a good place to find solace. But I think you also have to be careful and make sure that you're checking in with what you're bringing to those relationships in those moments that you need support. It's really easy to be frustrated or overwhelmed by something and then bring that to the person you're looking to connect with and receive support from, which is not really fair for them. And usually you're not going to receive the reaction that you're looking for anyway. You won't receive as much support when you come with frustration or you come with exacerbation, things like that. So ideally, you can enter those situations with the same intention that you mean to enter the challenging situations, or your day-to-day routine, which is, what am I looking to achieve from this? How can I best do that in a way that's productive and fair for me and productive and fair for the people who are experiencing it with me? So really trying to be cognizant of minimizing that reactivity, and making sure that you're parsing those challenges in a healthy way.
Mhm.
I think, and I can't understate this enough, like I think everyone needs to invest in some great coaching. I think that's the other piece here. When it's not fair for you to go to your partner or your business partner or your friends with, whatever might be so challenging about your day, like, this happened today and all these things, and these people were so difficult, and I'm having all these problems. There's people that you can pay to tell that stuff to who will give you really amazing advice back and who are trained to help you cope with that and give you tools that you can put in your toolbox to become better. You're one of these people. You happen to be both, which is a really rare quality. But I think if you can find those individuals and you make that part of your routine, ideally when you don't need it, when you aren't going through such a difficult time that you have to find something to make things better, and instead you're investing in yourself and you're investing in your skill set for parsing these challenges, I think is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about coaching with the other entrepreneurs so far. So, what is your experience then, and how did you actually decide to make the jump into getting someone who's really like a helper and a supporter for you?
Yeah, great question. I didn't start willingly. I was an executive at a company, and they had hired a coaching firm to come in and help solve some leadership challenges, and help us codify our values as an organization. And we were going through a lot of change, and the typical thing. Like we kind of needed it. It was something that was recommended to the CEO at the time, who went and found some people who were absolutely fantastic at what they did. And I established both a professional relationship with them there. And I kind of walked into that relationship thinking like, corporate therapy, great. Like this is the last thing we need. Like, can't we just get down to work and like get this stuff going? And after 2 to 3 sessions with those people who obviously had seen that countless times before, and it's their world to bring value where it's needed in those sorts of scenarios, they completely changed my outlook on it. It not only helped me in my professional life to better understand myself and how I was reacting in those situations, and obviously help the team dynamic, but I took those lessons away and took them into my personal life. I learned to be a much better communicator, a much better listener is a big part of that. And all of these concepts that I've been talking about around staying sane, like they're not things that I've invented or read about. Like I learned them from those individuals and through coaching, and listening to other great podcasts and blogs. But really, it kind of starts with those coaches. So I give them a tremendous amount of credit.
Hmm. I do too. I've been thinking about that because a couple of my friends have been mentioning it. So it's popping up again. It's synchronicity. I got to pay attention to it.
You've got to find the person that works for you, that you can really, that you have an instant rapport with. I think that's really crucial. There's a lot of people who can't, just like any job, there's a lot of people who can do the job, who have the background, the knowledge, the experience to be able to be effective. But I really think that coaching, just like any deep, honest relationship, needs to be with someone who you feel the ease of that relationship with.
Mhm.
And so you have to find somebody who's wise and someone who you can communicate effectively with and who you can be truthful with. Like coaching doesn't work if you hold things back or if you don't bring 100% honesty to the situation because you're just hurting yourself. You can't work on things that you don't expose. And so you need a sense of comfort and trust there. And individuals who can bring, don't try and find somebody who, in my opinion, is the same as you. Like try and find somebody who can listen to you, but then say that back to you, confirm it and challenge it with
Mhm.
something that will help you grow. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. I often say to myself and to my team, change is the only constant, and challenging oneself or surrounding yourself with people who would challenge you is a great catalyst for change. It's not always comfortable. We don't always want to peel the onion. We use that term in therapy a lot. Sometimes a little raw. So sometimes you might say to a coach or a therapist or a friend, like, I need a break. I'm a little raw. But it's really a great place to be when you feel like you're stretching and growing in that way, because then you're not only being better as a founder, as a friend, as a partner, if you're in a romantic relationship, and to people that you meet when you want to network with them as well. Because, yeah, you just become a better listener, a better friend, a better human in that sense.
Yeah, my co-founders and I take time every week to do this with each other, just to spend time at the beginning of the week talking about things that are not work related and then transition into the things that we have to cover that week. And spending that time as people while you have all this other stuff to cover for the business is so important to making sure that you don't build up, bad feelings over time, that things aren't left unsaid. Your co-founders and your peers can be your coaches as much as someone you hire to be a coach can be. And I think you have to make time for that humanity if you're going to be successful in the long run with those individuals.
Mhm. I agree. I love that you do that because oftentimes it, it's easy for me to be like, let's get to the agenda. We have an hour or 30 minutes. And what I realized is sometimes none of that actually needs to get done right in that moment. I just feel this sense of pressure on myself, like, okay, we got to keep moving forward. We got to keep, ticking things off on the to do list. But spending time with someone and just being like, what's going on with you? How was your weekend? Give me the download. It creates such a strong rapport. And the person knows they can trust you too in a work environment or a friendship or mentorship relationship.
Yeah, that foundation is what you fall back on when times get tough. And if you haven't spent the time to invest in it and to build it when times get tough, you have nothing to fall back on and you end up with problems. And I would say this isn't just your business partners either. I do this with our customers. I spend a lot of time with them just talking about personal things and the beginnings of calls, spending time building personal relationships. It's just as important to a renewal as the service you're providing or the price of that service. Um, I mean, like I mentioned, we spend so much time at work. If you don't enjoy what you're doing and if you're not making connections with people, you're not going to feel fulfilled, even if you're incredibly successful. So I try and focus on that as much as possible and make things personal. I know you do the same, and that's kind of how our friendship started. We went to an event together as peers and strangers, and we left as friends, and we continued that friendship ever since. And there are other things that have come into that have helped us out in professional realms, but we're also just two people who get along really well, and it makes all of the other stuff so much easier.
And we definitely like food.
Yeah. And your sense of humor and your joke telling abilities.
Yeah. By the way, I'm a terrible joke teller, and I had this neurosis that I wasn't funny for a while, and I shared it with you, Max. And you're like, no, no, I think you would actually be really funny. And we came up with this whole persona, which for many, many months kept me very happy.
You got lucky that that open mic nights shut down for a while and you didn't get forced on stage to do it. But it's all coming back, and you haven't gotten off the hook that easily. So I look forward to attending your open mic.
It'll be like a kilo comedy sideshow.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to ask you this next question because you just raised a kick-ass Series A, and I know often, well, not know, the story I tell myself oftentimes when companies do this is that there is a lot of stress and there's some struggle. You're figuring things out, you're working together with your team and the investors. So how do you relax in the midst of struggle while doing hard work?
Great question. Honestly, if you haven't done the other work that we've talked about, regular exercise, connections with friends, you don't have a lot to fall back on. That's kind of the foundation of that relaxation and those moments. Like, how do you do that? But for me, I spend so much time having conversations, and especially lately, given exterior circumstances, talking at my computer, which there's somebody on the other electronic side of that, but it's a lot of this and it's a lot of this. I really like making things. I mentioned I tinker a lot. I've been tinkering since I was a little kid, taking things apart, putting them together, trying to figure out how they work when they break. And so for me, it's actually going to a completely different passion of mine, which is electronics and old tube audio equipment. I'm a musician. I play guitar. I love old tube stuff. And so I build things. I build things from scratch. I fix old things. I learn about things that I have always been curious about how they worked, but I get my hands into physical things and I fix and construct them. And then I get the satisfaction of having learned something new and moving on to the next challenge in that area. But that's really how I've been spending most of my time, especially during COVID lockdown, is at my workbench in my garage with good music on and solder fumes and weird electronics components around me.
So I'm learning so much about you that I didn't know. You never sit down with someone, you're like, tell me your origin story. Like, tell me like all the points that you went through before your company got off the ground. So I didn't know that you actually played the guitar and you did that.
Yeah, I play the guitar. I taught myself when I was 10, 11, 12. I had grown up playing the piano. My parents got me piano lessons. I played classical piano for a couple years, but I hated practicing. I don't think it was the right. It helped me understand music theory. I actually minored in music theory in college while majoring in computer science. They're very related. We could spend an entire hour talking just about music and mathematics, but separately, I got into that on my own because my dad loved great music, Creedence and Led Zeppelin and also Boston, just great 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s music. So it was always all around me, but I wanted to do it myself. And the first thing that I wanted, of course, like any young kid, is I wanted a Stratocaster guitar, which I got when I was 14 or 15, black, white pickguard, maple neck, just like went down to Guitar Center in Hollywood and picked it up. And it was, I salivated over it and stared at it, and I couldn't fall asleep for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the next thing was a Marshall amplifier, and I couldn't afford a Marshall amp by the time that I had a place to put it. So I built it. And that was how I got into building electronics. It was part of my engineering training. I took some EE courses and the theory behind electronics, but I hadn't put anything together of my own. And so I looked at a schematic and I thought, well, this is just another circuit like anything else. I could put this together. And so I did. And I started with that, and then I built more and more and more. And I've been doing it for about 15, 20 years now. Probably built, I don't know, about 15 or 20 different guitar amplifiers over time and restored countless more. But yeah, that's my hobby and my passion.
And then you jam on them?
Yeah. Yeah. To the chagrin of my neighbors. My neighbor is, he's a lawyer, but he plays drums, and he built a soundproof room in his backyard, like a little shed that's soundproof. And I'm so jealous. And we went over for their housewarming party. was like, I think you play some sort of instrument because I saw you building the soundproof room. Either that or it's something that I probably shouldn't know about. But he confirmed it was a drum room. And so I thought that's great. I was like, oh yeah, I play guitar. He's like, yeah, no, we know. I, I hear it all the time. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry. He's like, no, you're good. I'm like, no, I'm not good. Thanks
You
for
like
saying.
build me the room that you built for you and your drum set, brah.
Been torturing my neighbors, but one day I'll get better and it'll sound like beautiful music.
You and I definitely love music. We often share playlists back and forth. And I'm wondering, what are like what are the genres or the artists that you go to when you want to take a mental break or you want to
Mm.
jam out and maybe change your focus?
Yeah, great question. Getting into a work mentality to like just get stuff done. My go-tos are usually going to be the Budos Band on Daptone Records out of Brooklyn. Incredible instrumental band. Kind of like 70s. I don't want to say funk. It's more like garage soul. They have horns. They have an amazing bass player with like this crazy long hair, and I don't know. They're incredible. Go check them out. It's either that or I'll put on some. I have a playlist of all things like Kavinsky and like these weird '80s instrumentals that are like it's like a Miami Vice movie from like a chase scene or the beginning of Lethal Weapon. It's like that sort of soundtrack.
Yeah.
I can't focus if there's words. If I'm trying to get stuff done, I want instrumental music, and so it could be electronic music. It could be that like funk soul stuff. It could be the Dip or something like that. Or some 80s sounds. But if there's a singer, if there's words, my brain will lock onto the speech, and it's really hard for me. If I'm trying to relax, it's the exact opposite. If I want to just chill out, it'll be somebody like Leif Volbeck, who's amazing. He's incredibly underpublicized. Leifvollebeck, I believe. He's Canadian, but originally Norwegian. He's incredible, really good. Or some other classic 60s type of stuff. Doris Troy or the Teskey brothers, who you turned me on to. Just like good, standard, kind of relaxing, but like trio, 4-piece type of stuff. Or like some Dave Brubeck, some jazz, something like that.
Mhm. Those are also good.
Yeah. And then it's classic rock and metal the rest of the time when I'm not doing that, or hip hop. I mean, really, there's no genre. Like, I like country music, I like jazz, I like rap and hip hop, from the clean stuff to the crazy club rap, all of it. I like pretty much all music. I don't like electronic music as much as I used to. I used to be really into it, and that was a phase I kind of went through it. I didn't feel like there was enough innovation in that to keep me interested. I like anything that has an interesting time signature, that has some like a lot of changes in it. Repetitive music is not my thing. So like house music, I can't deal with. Uh,
Mhm.
Got to be have some intrigue to the underlying structure of the music.
I wasn't very into electronic music until probably the last year. I don't know, would you consider Bob Moses electronic?
I guess so. Influenced at least.
Yeah, influenced at least. I've gotten more into artists like him in the last year,
Mhm.
in that genre. And then when I want to focus, my go-to for the last 2 years has been Max Richter's recomposition of Vivaldi's Four Seasons.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
It's a classic. Oh yeah, I should also mention my favorite classical music, which is the Chopin Nocturnes. Like far and away my most favorite classical music. I can put it on anytime to work, to relax, whatever. Uh, Maybe not to like run to or exercise to, but pretty much anything else. Although maybe you could get into a groove with that, but yeah, that feeds my brain.
Have you ever seen the movie The Professional?
I have, yeah.
So, what's his name who plays
Luke
the
Kaufman?
the crappy cop?
Oh, the crappy cop from The Professional. I don't know.
And he listens to the classical music when he goes in and just kind of destroys
Oh,
apartments.
uh,
Gary Oldman.
yeah, yeah, Gary Oldman.
Oh, so sometimes I feel like that when I listen to classical music is I just want to be a little crazy, not crazy like him by any means, but that I just want to like get that energy out, like that kind of frenetic energy when I listen to classical music. And it helps me do that when I'm trying to focus. For some reason, when I listen to it, it helps me somehow, like, I don't know, just dilute the energy that I have in a good way.
There's another artist who's really interesting and unique called Hauschka, Hauschka. I don't know, I'm spelling that wrong. I think Hauschka. But he plays prepared piano, which is not something that I had heard of before discovering Hauschka. And it's where you take a piano, but you open the top and you put things on the strings. So like a ping pong ball or something that's heavy plastic. And so it'll mute strings or it'll make strings very like pingy. And so you're playing the piano, but you're also getting these other tones in there that are really fascinating. And he's an incredible composer as well. So it's really interesting music. That and Dustin O'Halloran, who's done a lot of soundtrack work for movies, has an incredible set of albums. I think it's just called like Collected Works Volume 1 and Volume 2 that are all of his own compositions that are really amazing for kind of keying in and doing some good work.
Yeah, music's a wonderful way to, in my opinion, to keep yourself sane. Just put on some headphones, go for a walk, at least for me, and listen to some good damn music.
Yeah, Skid Row.
Oh my gosh, I haven't listened to Skid Row in so long. I'm gonna have to play some of that after, or maybe we'll use that as like the outro music for this podcast with you.
I love it. I mean, Sebastian Bach is a genius.
Oh man, he is. Oh, and their hair. I've been super into the 80s lately, and their makeup was so awesome.
Should watch Glow.
I should watch what?
Glow. Have you seen Glow? The Gorgeous Ladies Wrestling?
I've seen Glow.
Yeah. That's the perfect 80s recapturing.
Perfect 80s recapturing. Sadly, the 80s are no longer here, but
yeah. Well, I'm ready for 2020 to be no longer here. I think 2021 is going to be a much better year. I can't see how it gets much more challenging from an external perspective, but looking forward to all new things to come. I get nostalgic about old decades and old times, but honestly not as much. And this is just thinking about kind of where I am in the world generally. I really like to look forward. Maybe I'm too much of an engineer and too logical. Like looking backwards has little utility. I know a lot of people say like you learn from your past mistakes and all the rest of it, but I feel like you can only apply it moving forward. So while I love the old stuff, and that's like, it brings up all the nostalgia and the references in your memory and can spark a lot of creativity, I want to find the new thing. Like one of my fears is becoming that old man that only listens to like your time stops at a certain time and you don't care about anything new that's happening. And I feel like once you've done that, you've kind of given up. So I'm really focused on whatever next is to come, while simultaneously being an absolute curmudgeon about all the new trends of the youngins and the things that they're saying and what they're listening to. So maybe I'm hypocritical in some of these areas. My wife would say that I absolutely am. But I try and keep an open mind and stay as current and relevant as I can while maintaining a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, I like that. Same. Ditto to all of that. I don't want to be so out of touch with technology and innovation that in a few years I'm like, what's this new app thing that came out? I want to at least have some information about what's going on.
I mean, that could just be your stand-up persona. Like, what's with all of these new technologies? You could build an entire routine off of that. That's yours if you'd like to use it.
That will be another podcast series that you and I will do together.
Yeah. What was that? The Oh Hello show. Do you know about that with John Mulaney and Nick Kroll? You should go check out Oh Hello. They did it as a show on Broadway, and they also did it as like sketches on various other shows. But they basically just play two very old New York men complaining about basically everything, and at the end, making someone eat a sandwich of too much tuna fish. It's
That sounds disgusting.
A great experience. You should highly recommend it. You should check it out.
And what I so much enjoy about conversations, and especially when you and I talk, is there's so many new things we share with each other, and keeping that curiosity alive with our imagination, I think, is also so key to our wellness, because like, we can be curious about new technologies in our field. We can be curious about changing things within our organization, but then also being curious outside of it just creates another kind of fun avenue where our imagination can play.
Variety is the spice of life, after all.
Yes, so true. Well, my last question, and one of my favorites, is how often do you think about your own mortality, and does it at all influence your day
Tell me what you mean by
to day?
mortality, because I can make an assumption, but I'm curious all the facets of that word because I think it's a multifaceted word.
Yes, thank you for asking that. Is how often do you think about your own, I guess, finite life, and that we only have, so we think, we don't 100% know, a limited amount of time on this earth?
I don't think about that often, to be honest. I don't think about. I'm not one of these people who's like worried about the number of days that I have left, or I'm at this point in my journey, because no one ever knows. Like you could be still at the beginning, you could be right at the end. Nobody has any idea. So why spend time dwelling on it? Um, so as far as like comparing where you are relative to a finite existence, I don't do that very often. In another sense of the word mortality, you're recognizing the fact that you are mortal, that you are this weird organic system that has come out of all these other weird organic systems, and you're interfacing with other mortal things all the time. I try and think about that as much as possible because I think it really keeps you grounded. Like you were talking about this concept of, earthing and all the rest of it. I mean, that's really recognizing mortality in that sense. It's that you are this being that exists amongst all these other things. And I think that's really healthy to do. I think you run into problems when you don't do that, when you don't think about that connection and instead go back to what I referred to earlier as like the thing behind the eyes looking out at the other. I think that's a very dangerous place to be. Um, there's too many examples of that happening in the socio situation right now globally. Um, so I think that mortality piece happens a lot for me, whether that be something like how it feels to laugh really hard at your ridiculous friends, or really good food, or it's just kind of like, I guess I would phrase it as the living condition. I don't even want to say the human condition because I believe that animals feel it as well. It's part of the
Mhm.
reason that I'm a pescatarian, trying to limit my animal intake. But that and environmental reasons, and my own personal health reasons. But it's hard to own a dog and think that other beings don't have that same experience, that they aren't mortal and that you aren't basically exactly the same as they are. I mean, they interact with you, they do the same things, they experience joys and happiness and sadness and pain and emotions and connection and all the same things. And so I think having a pet, having a plant on your desk, having the window open and feeling the breeze, listening to a really good song super loud, having a great lunch, like all of those things are getting in touch with your mortality to me. And so
Mhm.
I try to do that and recognize it as such as much as possible and let that be the lens that I perceive reality through rather than what's going on between my ears and the things I'm thinking about becoming my reality. I think specifically related to entrepreneurship and kind of getting back to how we started this conversation, it's so important that you do that because it's easy to get lost in the rest of the stuff because it demands so much attention. But things can only take up the amount of room that you allot to them. And so if you limit the allotment that you give those challenges and the things that are, ugly about the journey, then you can really compartmentalize that, and not in an unhealthy way of I'm not dealing with it, but in a very healthy way of I'm only giving it this much space and I'll process what I can in that moment in that space. But to the mortality point, life is long, it goes on, tomorrow's another day, and that challenge may be completely different. It may go away on its own, it may have transformed to something that is, more threatening or more engaging. But everything will be different the next time you look at it. And I try and be cognizant of that instead of getting caught up in and wrapped up in the stress that it can produce. And, some days better than others, like I mentioned, but it's something to strive towards.
Yeah, and I think thinking about health, for example, because you're mentioning, excuse me, being a pescatarian is part of a way to realize that, you know, our days, and maybe this is semantics, but our days like are limited. We don't know. And so taking care of ourselves, telling people we love them, when someone pops up into our mind, like when I think about you, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to text Max. Like, what is he doing? Versus being like, oh, I'll get to it another time. I definitely try to stop and make space. I'm like, I'm catching this thought for a reason. This person's coming into my mind. So why not share with them how important they are to me, which also keeps me more present, realizing that, all right, today is one day and tomorrow is another day.
I love that. I also think that at least for me, it can be a real challenge to keep up with that. With so many demands for your attention in doing what we do, it can be really difficult to make sure you're following up on all those things. And sometimes you don't have the energy, even though you have the intention and the mind to do it. Or you can feel the emotion and not have the capability of following through on it in that moment. And then it's all too easy for that to slip away and for you to forget about it. I had a good friend who reached out way pre-COVID, like I want to say this time last year, and said, like, it's been so long since we caught up. Let's get dinner. And so much fun. We'd love to go do that. We just never really put it on the calendar. And I had it as an unread email in my personal email box forever. I kept seeing it and thinking, I need to email this person. I need to set this up, and feeling bad about myself for not having done it. And then I would think, no, don't, like, you have a lot of things on your plate. Don't feel bad about that. Like, they understand what you're going through. Like, they've done it themselves. They get it. And they did, but I still kind of felt bad about it. And then COVID happened. And now we can't get together. I can't travel. I can't have that lunch or that dinner. And I found myself almost a year later looking at that unread email, and I replied to it and I said, like, to be honest with you, like, this has been one of the biggest regrets for me of the last year, that I never followed up with you. Like, you sent this, I was really excited to do it. I kept meaning to reply. I didn't. Now we can't. And I feel really bad about it. Just to share that, and like, let's set this up when things get back to normal. Like, I promise we'll follow up this time and do it. And they're like, oh, no worries, whatever. It's like, it's not a problem. But like, to me, it was really important because I wanted to continue that relationship. I really like this person. I'd love to spend more time with them. And it's one of those things that got deprioritized so many times that it got lost in the shuffle. So I try and not do that. And I think the point that you raised about the importance of it is a really prescient one. It's tough when there's so many demands for your attention, and that prioritization is maybe one of the biggest challenges that I didn't mention about entrepreneurship. It's understanding the entirety of the list of things that need your attention, that either need your decision or your guidance, or maybe you're solely responsible for. If you don't do it, it doesn't get done. When you start, that's the majority of the things in the business, in your personal life, but there's personal relationships like that lunch or dinner, or like treating the person that you may be in, a partnership with that well, or your business partner, same sort of thing. The email unread count in your inbox. And at the end of the day, when you're just tired and you don't have the time, being able to forgive yourself for not getting to all the things you wanted to that day, and being able to reprioritize the next day so that you're keeping constant or current is something that I think is really hard to do well.
Yeah. And also, I just want to say thank you for wanting to be a better human by doing that.
You're welcome. I appreciate the acknowledgement, and ditto back to you, because I know you feel that way as well, that, the journey of self-improvement, ideally for the benefit of those around you, is something that I always strive towards if I can.
Yeah. Well, Max, tell everyone how they can find you.
You can find me, send me an email, my work email, max@fluxwork.co, FLUXWORK.co. You can find me in my garage tinkering on amplifiers or sitting with headphones on next to my record player or ask my neighbors. You'll probably hear me from blocks and blocks away, or get in touch with Bender.
Yes. Thank you so much, wonderful humans. Max, you included. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I definitely miss you. I do hope to see you soon. So thank you, everyone, and mahalo.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
I also want to give a shout out to Startup Hut, who's working with Kilo to develop and produce this podcast. Startup Hut dedicates itself to democratizing access and eliminating geographical barriers to a diverse community of like-minded founders, mentors, and investors dedicated to building successful startups. They organize live stream virtual pitch events and are building an online community of entrepreneurs that can leverage a network of investors, mentors, and partners and access community perks and resources. If you're interested in pitching at one of their future pitch events or partnering with startup, please contact George, George, at thestartuphut.com for more information. And you can find Kilo on your pocket computer or larger computer at www.kilo.app or on Insta at kilo.app. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.